What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, back with more NFL free agency plans. This time for the NFC. We covered the AFC yesterday, so if you haven't already checked out that video, make sure that you do. I go in depth through every single AFC team from the AFC East through the AFC South. So in this video, I'm going to cover the NFC the same way I did the AFC. I'm going to meticulously work my way through the roster and give you my thoughts on the roster, what needs to be fixed, how to approach free agency this offseason for every single NFC team. These are your NFL free agency plans for the 2022 NFL offseason. Before we get started, guys, make sure that you do Gronk spike that like button. It does definitely help these videos get out there to more people. So make sure you are Gronk spiking that like button. Also, Gronk spike the notification bell if you want to be notified when I go live or when the latest upload drops. Make sure that you do Gronk spike that notification bell. And if you aren't already subscribed, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are watching my content that are not subscribed, please give me a subscribe. It's not that hard. It's free. Subscribe to the channel for more NFL content just like this. We are going to be doing a lot more free agency content over the next couple of weeks. And then once free agency hits, we are going to be covering all the big signings for every team across the NFL. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. What's going on, everybody in the live chat? Natasha, nice to see you. She says, remember, guys, to please Gronk spike the like button. Tyler's World. What's up, man? How you doing? Nice to see you once again. So let's get started. We got the NFC. I'll try to be a little bit more brief than I was with the AFC. I did seem to take a lot of time with the first division. So now that I've covered the AFC, I kind of have a better idea of the time. So we've got our free agency plans. Let's get started. This does not include the draft, but I will mention the draft repeatedly in terms of what positions maybe a team might attack in the draft as opposed to what positions they might attack in free agency, and where maybe free agency is stronger as opposed to the draft, and, you know, back and forth in terms of what I think they should do in terms of the draft and free agency. So let's get started with the Dallas Cowboys and the NFC East. Okay, so we've got the Dallas Cowboys. Their needs are the guard position, tight end, defensive line, safety, and a linebacker. Those are their top 5 needs. They probably have more than that. There's actually been, this is a good team to start with because there's been a lot of news regarding the Dallas Cowboys today and over the last couple of days. So with the Dallas Cowboys, there's been news about, okay, Michael Gallup could stay now, and Amari Cooper could be the one to leave this free agency. There has been talk that they might cut and release Amari Cooper, and there's been talk of extensions or an extension with Michael Gallup. So that completely changes the game here for the Dallas Cowboys. I think right off the top, you do not see a team need, or you do see tight end. I was going to say you do not see it, but tight end is on the list. And a lot of that has to do with whether or not they retain Dalton Schultz. And I think what Dallas is thinking here is that they would rather have Michael Gallup at his contract, at his price, than Amari Cooper at his price. And they would rather, you know, have Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup than just Amari Cooper, because it feels like Dallas wants to be able to ensure that they can keep Dalton Schultz. And I agree with that. I would rather have Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz than just Amari Cooper. And I do feel like last season, Amari Cooper started to get phased out of the primary playmakers of the guys that were touching the ball the most last season. He became more of like a kind of, you know, what's the word? Like a spark in the offense, a big play threat in the offense, but not necessarily a consistent threat in the offense. And that's something that I feel like is concerning if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. If you want to keep Amari Cooper, I just don't think he's worth the amount of money that they've invested into him currently. I like Amari Cooper as a player. I think he's fantastic. I think he does a lot of things well. I think he's a great route runner. I think he has great chemistry with Dak Prescott. I think he's electric. I think he's fast. He's quick. Gets in and out of his breaks extremely well. and is good down the field. I think he fits this offense. I think he fits Dak Prescott. But at his current price, he might be one of the more overpaid receivers in the NFL, given his actual impact on this team in terms of wins and losses, right? He produces, but a lot of the times he's not the guy that you look to on third down to move the chains. He's not the guy that you look to on a big play. And continuously, we've kind of seen with Amari Cooper that he doesn't come to play in the biggest of games, especially on the road. We've seen many times. So for Dak Prescott, I think retaining Dalton Schultz, his chain mover, his reliable target over the middle of the field, and then also having Michael Gallup to complement CeeDee Lamb, where Michael Gallup's more that perimeter target, CeeDee Lamb's more that slot target. That would be the way to go if you could keep that structure. Now, the guy that's really hurting all of this is Ezekiel Elliott. And if they could somehow move off of Ezekiel Elliott, move Zeke's contract elsewhere, that would be ideal. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. I don't think they're going to do that. But if I was the Cowboys, I would have never signed Zeke to the contract that they did. But if they can somehow move Zeke, that would be perfect. At least going into next year, you've got to consider using Tony Pollard more, okay? Because Tony Pollard is certainly a guy that I feel needs to be getting the ball more. And that's going to be interesting whenever his whole situation comes up. But taking a look at the Dallas Cowboys and their depth chart, I feel like the guard position is a need because of Connor Williams. Connor Williams is a free agent, not Zach Martin, as somebody asked. Tyler World says, how do they need a guard? They've got Zach Martin. Well, there's two guards that start in the NFL on every team. So just because you have one guard doesn't mean you have both, Tyler's World. So when you look at their offensive line, Tyron Smith, left tackle, who's getting older, you might have to consider at some point getting younger at that position, but he's still there. And we've seen tackles play for a long period of time and be able to sustain success. The problem with Tyron Smith is his age and his injury history are two things that don't work for me. But you have to make sure, like you did last offseason, bring in a quality backup swing tackle for when Tyron Smith or La'el Collins go down, that you can place that guy into the starting lineup, because just the history of Tyron Smith and Collins, that you will need that swing tackle at some point in time. You will need to have that third tackle. So the third tackle is very important, whoever that is going to be. I'm not sure if they think that's Steele or somebody else. But the left guard position, back to Connor Williams. Personally, I would let him walk. I think he's a little bit overrated. From a grading perspective, Connor Williams is graded well from PFF and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that you could go elsewhere, cheaper at this position, maybe younger, go in the draft and draft somebody. And I don't think that the production of the offensive line would be all that different. I think Connor Williams has been picked on in pass protection in the past. And I would let somebody else overpay for him personally. Center is still a concern for me, although they have, still that locked down. It's not like that's a need necessarily. But the offensive line is still quality. It's not the top unit in the league like it used to be. And then figuring out Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup is kind of the next thing on the list for the offense. And like I said, I would rather have Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz than Amari Cooper, but I would rather have Amari Cooper than Zeke. So, the first idea would be to move off of Zeke if you could. I don't think that's going to happen, so it looks like they're going to have to maybe move on from Amari Cooper. I think you could trade him to somebody and get some assets back to use maybe on your defense or your offensive line, like I said, because I think Amari has some value. He's a top 20 receiver, if not more, better than that, top 15. So you could get something off of him. Defensively, I think this defense looks a lot better than it did a year ago when it comes to young talent, when it comes to the future, and I think that's awesome. Obviously, Dan Quinn had an influence on that, absolutely. I feel like with Micah Parsons there, and you've got Diggs at corner, those are two foundational pieces for your defensive line, because I think Parsons is better off playing a majority on the defensive line. And then you've got the linebacking core, which you could put him at linebacker. He's going to play a little bit of linebacker. He's going to play a little bit of defensive end, I think, just depending on the down and the distance and the formation and all that sort of stuff. DeMarcus Lawrence is a very good piece, still a very good player. Honestly, maybe underrated at this point because everyone thought he was overrated, and now the spectrum's kind of changed. The middle of your defense could use some work. The defensive tackle position. You did spend a 3rd-round pick on it last year and a 3rd-round pick on it the year before with Neville Gallimore, who I believe was hurt last year. Quez Watkins is a free agent. I would look to maybe add some beef to the interior defensive line, or add somebody, maybe that could be even a pick early in the draft that you could look to just completely dominate the defensive line, because that's really what you're missing. Randy Gregory, you could honestly Gregory's probably going to get a big chunk of change, so he's probably going to leave. So to replace his presence, maybe you play Parsons more at D end with Lawrence at D end, and then you look to replace Gregory with more of an interior presence and an interior force rather than an edge force. Dorrance Armstrong is somebody that I would like to keep if I'm the Cowboys as a nice depth piece. Terrell Basham is a very underrated depth piece as well. And you also have Chauncey Golston as well, who you drafted in the 3rd round, who could come in as a depth piece. So I think your edge position is good. I do think you need to improve your interior position. The linebacker position is definitely going to be something that to watch. Jabril Cox was a nice find in the 4th round. And like I said, Parsons will play some linebacker. But I do think that you should be looking to add a linebacker. Maybe you re-sign Keanu Neal. Both him and Van Der Esch are linebackers that are free agents. I think Van Der Esch can go. I don't think really he's not really played a ton of reps for you over the last 2 to 3 years. He did play better last year. I would rather keep somebody like Keanu Neal, who might be better off in coverage, and then you've got a guy like Cox to play in the run game. But maybe you look for the typical Dan Quinn type linebackers, or maybe a veteran presence like somebody like KJ Wright to fill that spot. But when you really look at, or you could go young, really when you look at the defense, it's a lot more about retaining players for me than it is about adding. You could definitely look to add to your safety position, specifically free safety. I think you want to keep Jaron Kearse if you can at strong safety. He was fantastic, very underrated. Malik Hooker will probably be gone and get a better contract elsewhere. DeMonte KZ could come back, maybe not. Don't know. Donovan Wilson's decent as well, but getting a younger or playmaking free safety might be the way to go if you're going to spend money in free agency. That might be the position that they really look towards. What's going on, Cryptic Ninja, Don Burr, Jake? Thank you guys for joining. What's up? The free safety position, we've got guys like Marcus Williams, Marcus May. These players would be excellent fits for this defense, and I do feel like would be perfect additions. Even a lower tier name like Anthony Harris or maybe even Jaqueski Tart, although he's more of a strong safety type. I feel like those guys would work for this defense. Quandre Diggs would be an awesome addition to this defense. But I definitely would look at adding a safety. If I was to spend any sort of money on the defense to make one position better, it would be the safety position, because I think everything else is pretty good, and you could probably fill your interior defensive line through the draft or just with cheaper free agents. Some interior defensive linemen. Let's check for you here. Defensive tackle. DJ Jones is a guy that I love. I think he'd fit this defense very well, playing in a similar scheme with the 49ers last season. Taking a while for it to load up, so I'm just going to skip that. But corner position, you would like to upgrade from Anthony Brown. You did spend a 2nd-round pick on Joseph a year ago. Hopefully he takes a step up. Not sure on his progress. The team knows that better than I do. Trevon Diggs is going to be your number 1. Jordan Lewis is your nickel. He's solid. You could look to add maybe a veteran. Maybe a veteran like an Xavier Rhodes. If you want more of a man-to-man guy, maybe you go with a cheaper option like Mike Hughes from the Chiefs. So that's kind of how I see the Dallas Cowboys. I think a couple cheaper options. Maybe you go with cheaper veterans at defensive tackle, cornerback, spend a little bit of money at free safety, retain Curse at strong safety, let Gregory walk, retain Keanu Neal if you can, let Connor Williams walk, pay Michael Gallup. I'm not sure what you're going to do with Amari Cooper. Pay Dalton Schultz. Make sure you have a quality swing tackle, and then just work on the draft. The Cowboys are very good at drafting, and that's something that they use to their advantage to fill in their needs every season. So get a little bit bigger up front in the interior, hopefully add a little bit to the secondary, and the Cowboys should be good to go. They're a contender in the NFC. I really like the way they're structured. They have, some young foundational pieces, quarterback, wide receiver, defensively up front and in the secondary. So the Cowboys are looking real good for the future. This is a definite offseason for them to have a little bit of a swing because they're in a tough cap position. So they're going to have to make some tricky moves. But if they pull it off, they're going to be in a good spot. So that's the Dallas Cowboys. Let's get some water here real quick. As Jake says, please hit that like button, guys. It really, really helps people find this video. And if you do enjoy what I'm doing here, and if you do enjoy the content, please do Gronk spike that like button. And anything you can do to help the channel, share this to your friends. Join the Discord, man. That's great. We get every notification to the Discord. I really want to make it a priority this year, to get that Discord community built up. I feel like that is a real strength so far for the channel, and I think it's a great community. So if you guys want to be a bigger part of the community, check out the Discord. Link is in the description. Let's get to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are next. So we've got the Eagles, and they have some money here. The Eagles are probably one of the more interesting teams in free agency due to the fact of the amount of draft picks they have to utilize in the draft and how that might also help them build their roster and then also use for trade bait. So the Philadelphia Eagles could be a team that actually go out there, be aggressive, and trade for their needs if they want to. No, Don, I have not done the Lions yet. I am just starting here with the NFC East, and we are on our second team of the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles, their needs right there, as you see, safety, corner, wide receiver, guard, linebacker. There are more as well, but these are just my personal picks. So let's start on offense. Wide receiver, you need a number 2, and I would argue you need a number 3. I look at this depth chart, I don't see anything past Devontae Smith. I think Jalen Reagor has been an utter disappointment, and Eagles fans might disagree with me here. I don't think he's a very good football player. He does not separate from man-to-man coverage. He does not make people miss in the open field. He does have speed. That's about it. I don't think he's very good. That's just my opinion. Devontae Smith is good. I think he'll even get better this year. He's very young, and he's just developing really into his body as an NFL receiver. I think he's going to be a top 10 receiver, top 15 receiver within the next couple of years. Quez Watkins, I like as a niche player. I think he's good to stretch the field. You get him in the screen game a little bit. That's totally cool. He works for their current offense, but he's more of like a number 4 to me on a normal team. So you need to look to add to the wide receiver position. Whether that's trading for somebody, maybe you trade for a guy like Brandon Cooks. If you want to take that step, Brandon Cooks has fit every single system he's ever played in. The Texans would like to trade him, I believe. And you could probably get him for a 3rd-round pick. If you want to get a nice number 2 who's got speed, you guys like speed at the position, he would fit, I feel like. But if you want to go through free agency, you could try to target somebody with bigger money like Chris Godwin, who's an excellent football player and would probably fit that slot position to give a reliable option over the middle of the field for Jalen Hurts or whoever the quarterback's going to be in the future. And then you've also got guys like Allen Robinson. I don't think Odell would probably go there, but there's other guys as well who Mike Williams could be a target for you. I don't know if he would necessarily work well with Jalen Hurts. Maybe he would, actually, because he is kind of a jump ball guy, and they don't really have that big-bodied presence for this receiving core. So maybe, like, I look at a receiving core as a basketball team. I feel like a basketball team, you want the power forward, you want the shooting guard, you want the point guard, and it just feels like they don't have a lot of size. So maybe adding that big receiver could help as well. I know that they kind of prefer speed at this point in time, but that's the way that I look at it. So wide receiver positions, you could target through the draft as well. I mean, but they haven't been very good at drafting receivers lately. So that's something to consider. Juju would be a nice add, I feel like, and he wouldn't have to travel very far to play for the Eagles. He's in Pittsburgh. You've also got guys like I said, Mike Williams. Even like a lower key name like Zay Jones would add a little bit of size to your receiving core, and he wouldn't cost a lot. Same thing for Rashard Higgins. Who else? You've got Isaiah McKenzie is fast. DJ Chark is fast, could stretch the field for you. There's a lot of options here, and even maybe a shot at a guy like Laquan Treadwell, who actually came on at the end of last year for Jacksonville. So there's a lot of receivers and different tiers, some really good, some, kind of, go for it, shots in the dark types. Offensive line is one of the better ones in football, in my opinion. Now, I messed up in the last video where I said that Brooks was coming back. He's actually retiring, which I forgot about. That is a huge loss. Obviously, he's been hurt the last couple of years, though. Now, you did find a left tackle, which is nice. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Andre Dillard now that he's just basically a first-round pick as a backup. I'm not sure if they're going to move him to guard, if they're going to try to trade him, what they're going to try to do. They're just going to keep him on the roster as their swing tackle. But you still got Lane Johnson, at least for one more year. Jason Kelce contemplating retirement, but he's going to probably come back for one more season, so that's good at center. And Landon Dickerson can play guard for you for one more year until Kelce eventually retires and then probably move to center. So what I would be looking to do is trying to find a guard, probably nobody that's like super expensive. Through free agency, I'd probably be looking for more of the short-term solutions, and obviously with the Eagles, they like guys that more so they kind of like all shapes and sizes, but they definitely like athletes at the guard position. And I would view some guys like Glowinski from the Colts might not be a bad, not super expensive type of guy. Who else? You've got, maybe you take a shot at Duvernay Tardif. He was a good player a couple of years ago, and he kind of took that time with the whole doctor situation. Andrew Norwell is older, but still a good player. They could look at who else. James Daniels might be more expensive. Maybe Kyle Long. I don't know. Who else? Let's keep going through this list. Not a ton of options there, but I do feel like they could get a guard in free agency if they want, or they could draft another one. They've been good at drafting offensive linemen, so you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that they draft an offensive lineman and they sign a receiver. That might be the way to go, just based on your track record of doing both. Tight end, Dallas Goedert's there, and Richard Rodgers and company are the backups and all signed, so that's good. Quarterback-wise, I made a whole video about Gardner Minshew. If you could trade Gardner Minshew for some assets, wide receiver, a third-round pick, let's say. Let's say you trade Gardner Minshew for a fourth or a third-round pick. You could utilize that pick on offensive line, wide receiver, defense, right? So maybe you trade Gardner Minshew to a quarterback-needy team, but Jalen Hurts is going to be there. And like I've said, I think you should build your team now for Jalen Hurts. And then if he's not the guy and not the answer, you can always get a quarterback last to finish off the process and then go for a Super Bowl. So I'd use these picks to trade for players or to use them in the draft to build your roster up and then build that young foundation for Hurts or for the next quarterback. Personally, I'm not 100% sold on Hurts. Some people are, some people aren't. Some people are totally not, and some people are totally. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I see some good things about him. I see some bad things about him. He definitely needs to improve as a passer. If he doesn't improve as a passer this season, I think he needs to go. That's my personal opinion. Miles Sanders is good. They could use a power back. You could probably get one through the draft. I don't think they're going to be spending, much on free agency through running back position. Defensive line, I think you're good in the interior. You don't need to do much there. The edge position, Derek Barnett's a free agent. Personally, I'd let him probably go unless you came cheap. Josh Sweat's a good player. I think Brandon Graham should be back. I don't think he's a free agent. He's good. So Brandon Graham, I'm not sure if he's still going to be the same player coming off the injury, but he'll be back. Then you got Josh Sweat. So I'd have Sweat and Graham as your primary starter and then try to find like that third option like you always do with like a veteran, like you have in the past with Chris Long, like you did last year with Ryan Kerrigan. So I would be looking to add like a pass rush pop, somebody like Jerry Hughes or somebody like Justin Houston, an older player that still got some rotation value. Somebody like that. Mario Addison is another example of that. This year's Ryan Kerrigan, basically. Or you could look to somebody maybe with some upside like Kamiko Ture, who's going to be very cheap. I don't think they need to spend a lot of money on this position yet. Maybe that's down the road, but not yet. Linebacker, they need to address, at least with one free agent. I think really where they should spend their money is safety. I think they should get one safety, especially with the amount of cover 2 they play. I think safety is valuable to them. So corner, not so much. You already have a big ticket item with Darius Slay. I'd be looking to maybe keep Steven Nelson. I don't know. But it would be nice to upgrade the nickel position from Avonte Maddox to somebody else. So maybe you go with you try to sign like a Bryce Callahan or a Reed or somebody like that in free agency. Safety position, though, I think they're probably going to move on from both the safeties they had last year, which was Anthony Harris and Rodney McLeod. I think they're probably going to bring in a younger name, maybe a more high-profile name like Marcus May or like Marcus Williams. Who else? They could go with somebody like Justin Reed, too, a little bit cheaper but good. I don't know. Maddox is 4-year contract. I don't think he's personally very good. So yeah, Tyson thinks he's good. Eagles fan there. I mean, I don't think he's very good. So that's just my opinion. But I just because I think he's so one-dimensional. I think he's a good tackler and he's feisty and all that stuff. I don't think he's like great. But I guess they could be looking for a perimeter corner then if they move on from Steven Nelson. So maybe they go with Joe Hayden. I think Joe Hayden would fit. Kyle Fuller, Xavier Rhodes, somebody like this. Maybe Ahkello Witherspoon. Levi Wallace, somebody like that. Good zone player. Isaiah Oliver is an interesting name. But those guys make sense to me. I don't think they're going to go for J.C. Jackson. It wouldn't make sense because they don't play a lot of man coverage. It would be almost pointless to go after somebody of that profile. The linebacker position, I would look to add to. Alua Khan would be a guy that I think that's how you say his name, would be somebody that I would be maybe targeting, as well as Devondre Campbell, A.J. Johnson, Jayon Brown, Anthony Walker, all of these players. Maybe you add speed, like Quan Alexander isn't like a high-profile name, but he can run and he can cover. Those guys would make sense. Lower key names, Josie Jewell, Anthony Barr. Yeah, I would agree with that. Those guys make sense to me. Just a linebacker, one of them. They need one linebacker to sign. You can draft another one, but they need to sign somebody. So when I look at the big money acquisitions here, to simplify it, I think it's wide receiver. They should spend some money to get a receiver because I think they suck at drafting them. And then I would look to add a safety, probably for some bigger money, or a linebacker. I think you can spend less at linebacker nowadays, though, and get away with it. So I would spend more on safety, a lot on receiver, get those two things covered. Maybe draft offensive linemen, draft defensive line as you always do. Corner, you could go cheap as well because corner's not huge in your scheme. So that's the way I see the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that they're very intriguing because they have so many options with what they can do. All right. The New York Giants are next. The New York Giants have a new regime. So for you Giants fans out there that maybe aren't quite understanding what the Giants are going to be. So clearly they've got Brian Daboll from the Buffalo Bills. Brian Daboll has spent time as a Bill, as a Patriot. He's from Alabama. He has a lot of, kind of Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick roots. And then on top of that, and Nick Saban as well. And then from the management perspective, their management is going to be from Buffalo. So there's going to be Buffalo-based thinking. So what I would expect is they kind of like Buffalo, spend money on wide receiver, spend money on quarterback, spend money on probably corner, coverage. And these are things that they already kind of have. So that's a plus. So that's maybe why they also took the job, which makes sense. But when you look at their biggest needs, they definitely need to reshape their whole offensive line. That's first and foremost. They need to reshape their offensive line. Now, I do think that the Giants were much more talented last year than they ever got credit for. Like, a lot of things went the wrong way. I thought their coaching was disastrous, and obviously losing Daniel Jones was bad. But I think this year is all about finding out what you really have in Daniel Jones, because we've seen flashes and we've seen things that are positive, but we haven't quite seen if he's going to be the guy for the future. Kind of like Jalen Hurts of the Eagles as well. And I think you have a very strong foundation on defense. Now, there's been talk that you might trade Saquon Barkley and James Bradberry. I think it would be a mistake to trade James Bradberry. I could understand trading Saquon, but I also wouldn't trade him for a 4th-round pick. Now, here's the thing with the Giants. I would keep Saquon for the last year on his rookie contract because that's a good deal, and then maybe move off of him. I love Saquon. He's one of my favorite players when he's healthy. But I would see what he can do in this offense, right? This is a new offense. This is Brian Daboll offense. And this is a guy that comes from New England and Buffalo. Like, they like to pass, and Saquon is a great receiver. So using him out of the backfield as a receiver, even if it doesn't mean he doesn't touch the ball as a runner as much, would be a great way to utilize him. I think they've got great pieces in Kadarius Toney in the slot that they could utilize in the Cole Beasley type fashion. You've got Kenny Golladay on the outside. You've got Darius Slayton with speed still there. John Ross, speed guy on the outside that could be utilized. So they've definitely got some players here. Sterling Shepard, I think, is a free agent. Let me just check. Is he not a free agent? I thought he was a free agent. It looks like he's not a free agent, which is interesting. I feel like they could trade him or something. He's getting a little bit older. I guess he's not a free agent. No, I don't see him here as a free agent. He was really good last year, actually. He's an underrated player. I don't see him here on the list. I thought he was a free agent. Maybe I'm just losing myself here. But yeah, regardless of that, I think you've got pieces at wide receiver, so you don't have to spend a lot on wide receiver. And the front office just completely destroyed this team from a cap perspective. Like Durkant saying -$6 million, that's horrendous. Yeah. But they got to do a lot of work in terms of restructuring contracts and trading players, and that's why they've thrown out the idea of trading James Bradberry, trading Saquon Barkley because of this. The tight end position is probably not going to be a position that they really address, because when you look at the Bills, they've kind of never really spent money on tight end. Dawson Knox is kind of their guy, and Dawson Knox is more of a move tight end. He doesn't block a ton, so maybe they want to bring back Evan Ingram. I feel like you move on from Evan Ingram and maybe find somebody that's got the same sort of skill set, but just like a different player. Like, let's just check tight end. So they could maybe go after somebody, like if they want to go cheaper veteran, maybe Jared Cook, somebody like that, similar skill set. They could go with, honestly, CJ Uzoma makes sense for this offense. Gerald Everett, a little bit more blocking upside there. Maybe you go with somebody like Mo Alley Cox, who kind of deserves more of a bigger role on a different team. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of money, though, on this position, and they might draft the position. Jacob Hollister makes some sense as he spent time in Buffalo, so maybe he'd have familiarity with the offense, but that's more of a low-key signing. So I don't think they're going to spend a ton on tight end, but it's really like O.J. Howard. Like, a lot of people want O.J. Howard on different teams, but quite clearly, guys, O.J. Howard, I would not recommend to be a starting tight end at this point. Unless he makes a big turnaround in his game, he just hasn't been the same player since the injury. The offensive line, though, they need to try to, and the thing is, they can't really spend money if they don't have it. So they might have to look to the draft in multiple rounds to address the offensive line, because the only real answer they have here is Andrew Thomas at left tackle, who I think is a good player. Every other position could use an upgrade on the offensive line. You could bring in a backup running back who's cheaper behind Saquon to help him out. Defensively, I think they're good in the interior with Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. They have lost some of the depth. Danny Shelton and Austin Johnson are both free agents. It would be nice to retain Austin Johnson, but I'm not sure how similar their defense is going to look. I believe Vic Fangio is now their defensive coordinator, so they still are going to maintain, those bigger bodies in the inside, and then they're going to try to build, from the back to the front. But I wouldn't be surprised either if they tried to get a linebacker, because Vic Fangio loves linebackers. So maybe somebody like Johnson would make sense, or somebody like Josie Jewell from the Broncos would make some sense to me. But I think they're good in the interior. They definitely need an edge rusher. If they're going to spend money this offseason, it's got to be on edge rusher. Like, if they're going to somehow sign somebody, it's got to be one of these edge rushers that can get to the quarterback, because they don't really have that. Ojulari was pretty good last year, the second-round pick. He looks promising, but they need a guy on the opposite side to help him out, and maybe a veteran in that regard. But their secondary is already pretty strong. They don't got to do much. James Bradbury, Xavier McKinney, Logan Ryan, Adoree Jackson, Julian Love, Aaron Robinson, all these guys are signed and good to go for next season. So I don't think you got to change much there. If you're going to spend money, edge rusher, linebacker, and obviously offensive line. But those are the major needs on their team. And I think this team is just going to be a lot better. Or Wink Martindale. I got Vic Fangio and Wink Martindale confused. But yeah, I think they're looking pretty good. And I feel like if they can figure out this cap situation, that's what it's going to be about this offseason. I think the coaching of having Wink Martindale on defense, having Brian Daboll on offense, is going to be such a big deal for them. It's going to greatly improve them. Like, I can't even speak enough on how much that's going to improve their team. Jason Garrett as OC, dreadful. I like their DC from the past, but I think you even got an upgrade in that regard, and obviously an upgrade at head coach from Joe Judge to Brian Daboll. So if Daniel Jones could stay healthy, that's another thing. Maybe look for a backup quarterback, somebody that can play a little bit, and I have recommended Mitch Trubisky as that option. That's another player too. So I think this team is probably not going to be like a playoff team this year, but if they make the right moves, they can start to build a team that's going to be promising into the future, because they definitely have some pieces here together. And I think their defense is going to be good next year. And I think their offense has a lot of skill talent that Brian Daboll can take advantage of. So that's the Giants. If you guys have any questions about that, let me know. Offensive line. Probably more so through the draft. And maybe you could spend a little bit of money on the defense up front. And that's where I'd spend in free agency. The Washington football team. All right, Washington football team, a.k.a. the Commanders now. I was just getting used to saying the football team, too. Like, man. So, the offense. Terry McLaurin is your wide receiver 1. I'm not sure if they're in love with Brown, the third-round pick from a year ago, as their other perimeter target. But what I would think is that the Washington football team aka the Commanders, as I continue to say the football team. It's just too fun to not say it. Terry McLaurin on the outside, Brown on the other outside. You got Curtis Samuel probably more as the slot guy. So those are your 3 starting receivers. I don't think that's terrible. You could maybe add another one, but even guys like Antonio Gandy Golden, they got a little bit of upside there. Maybe you re-sign Cam Sims. I think he's underrated. You could probably move on from Adam Humphries. I don't think that's a big deal at all. But the receiving position isn't bad. It could be better. But I think you're fine there. The offensive line, Leno Jr. will be back. Eric Flowers is there, so that's cool. So you got the left side pretty much locked down. The problem is the right side with Brandon Scherf becoming a free agent. That's going to be a massive loss. I don't see him coming back, but at least you'll retain some money because of that, right? And you'll have some money to work with. So maybe you go with the cheaper alternative at that position. You could also get younger at that position through the draft. Center, I would like to see an upgrade at the center spot. So looking at, maybe you bring in somebody like Matt Paredes, who was a Panther of the past, who was with Ron Rivera, I believe. You could go that route, but you've got centers here. Let's check. There's a few quality ones. I don't think, because if they move on from Brandon Scherf, it wouldn't make sense for them to spend money on Ryan Jensen. So somebody a little bit cheaper, like Ben Jones would be a little bit cheaper. Justin Britt, Ted Karras, who else? Brian Allen, I don't think is necessarily a fit. Bradley Bozeman would be a nice fit, I feel like. So those guys make sense to me at center if they want an upgrade there. And you've got your right tackle situation fine. I think the offensive line, it's not fantastic. It's not dominant, but it's solid. It's workable. You're going to lose your best player, but as long as you don't get terrible at right guard and you just maintain some semblance of average, you should be fine. The tight end position, you've locked up Logan Thomas, I believe, for the future, so that's good to go. Maybe you look to add a lower key tight end, as your number 2 tight end, but I think they're fine at tight end. It's really coming down to the quarterback position, and like I said, maintaining average, maintaining no weakness on the offensive line. That's really the big thing. You don't want a huge, massive weakness on the offensive line. That's when you become really bad. So maintain that average at offensive line. Quarterback, Taylor Heineke is not going to be the guy. Neither is Kyle Allen or Garrett Gilbert. So you're looking elsewhere. Quarterbacks that make sense for me for Washington. I don't think they're in the sweepstakes for really a trade, but I do feel like somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo makes sense. I just don't think Kyle Shanahan wants to help Washington very much because he hates them. I'm just going to be honest. So the quarterback position could use an upgrade. Marcus Mariota in this team, in this situation, does make sense to me because Ron Rivera and this coaching staff has experience with Cam Newton and utilizing a running quarterback. That's a big element of Marcus Mariota. Mariota's also an accurate underneath passer. They could also bring in Teddy Bridgewater as a bridge transitional player. I don't think Jameis Winston is the perfect fit here. I think you're looking for somebody with accuracy, quick decision making, and underneath, just ability to get the ball out. You could go with Bridgewater, Mariota. I'm not sure if these are long-term solutions, but they're more so. That's why I think Jimmy's a great fit here. And I would maybe be willing to give like a third or second round pick for Jimmy. I don't think I'd be willing to give a first. It would be interesting to see Trubisky here. I don't think they're going to be able to get Minshew, although I feel like Minshew would be a great fit for the Washington Commanders at quarterback because he's on the Eagles. I just don't think that would work. And they could also draft somebody, but you might be willing to wait till next year to draft somebody, given that the draft this year just isn't that promising. But if somebody falls to you, you could go with a veteran in free agency, and you could draft somebody as well. You could try to address it in multiple ways. Running back position is good. They might want to keep J.D. McKissick, who's been good for them, but I really like Patterson, so I think he's a good backup. Obviously, Gibson is the starter. Defensively, no, I didn't. I didn't. I just, it's actually my grandpa's ring. So the defense, You've got Payne and Allen in the inside with Ioannidis. You could maybe move Ioannidis for a different player or a pick. Given that he's a very good player and probably more useful to another team in a bigger role, you could probably move him and get some assets back if you like. But Allen, Payne, and Ioannidis is a killer trio in the inside. Sweat, and obviously you've got... What's his name? Why am I forgetting his name? Chase Young. So you got Young and you got Sweat on the outside. Davis you drafted in the first round. You need to look to get faster at the opposite linebacker position. Their defense still utilizes a lot of linebackers, so it would make sense to get faster at that spot. I think that's been a weakness. Cole Holcomb and David Mayo, these guys have been kind of weaknesses for them the last couple of years. But Jamin Davis helps. He's athletic. He's pretty good. So they're fine there, but they need to get another linebacker in there. Somebody like in the Quan Alexander type of mold. Let me see. Who else? Gerard Davis, maybe. Somebody like that. Eric Wilson would be solid. Grugier Hill, maybe. Who else? Nothing too crazy, but like a nice number 2 linebacker. White from the Chargers, maybe. So then you go to the secondary, and the corner position is solid. William Jackson and Kendall Fuller at 2 of the 3 positions. You would like to have a better other perimeter corner. Darryl Roberts is a free agent who is a depth player. Bobby McCain at safety is a free agent. Troy Apke is also a free agent at safety. You have DJ Hayden on the roster. He's more of a backup nickel player. So looking for another perimeter presence on the outside. That's what I would be looking for. And safety. So I think you got rid of Landon Collins already, or you're set to get rid of him. Curl is pretty good, and Reeves isn't bad, but you would like to get better at the safety position. Now, typically this team, Ron Rivera and company, they've never really spent a ton of money on safety. They typically go with cheaper alternatives, cheaper options. You could go to the draft maybe to get an impact player, but there's a lot of free agents, safeties that you could probably get for cheap to upgrade that spot. And I think it's wise to move off of Landon Collins. He just paid too much money for his usage, and that type of safety isn't really valuable in the NFL any longer. The downhill in-box safety. So upgrading the coverage at the safety position would be huge. So honestly, Washington, a lot of it's going to come down to getting a better quarterback, but it's going to be tough to do that this year, just the way the landscape's looking. It's going to be tough to trade for one this year, and you're really looking towards the free agency for a bridge option, just an upgrade over Tyler Heineken, my guy. And then wide receiver, I think you're fine. Offensive line, you've got to maintain that average stability. Get better in the back end of your defense and get faster at linebacker. That's the way I see Washington. I think they're an okay roster right now, but they could definitely get better at a few spots. So that is the NFC East. All right, let's take a drink of water. What's going on, Lenny? How you doing, bro? I am very jealous of Lenny, who has seen the Batman. Bro, I haven't been this excited for a movie in like forever. I wasn't this excited for Spider-Man. I wasn't. I'm so excited for this movie tonight. I can't wait. Okay. So, the next division, we're going to go with the NFC South next up. Or NFC North, sorry. NFC North. So let's go with not watching the trailers. Yeah. I watched them. Okay. The Detroit Lions. Let's kick off the NFC North with the Detroit Lions. Everybody's favorite team. The Detroit Lions have a lot of work to do, but luckily they have enough money to do some work in free agency, but Do they have the pull? You know, a lot of Lions fans are a little bit upset with me because I'm a little bit of an honorable Detroit Lions fan, right? So Lions fans are a little bit upset with me with my predictions for free agency, that I haven't given them all the superstars. I haven't, had them just spend all this money and upgrading all these positions, because I'm not sure, I'm going to be honest with you guys, because I always am, that anybody wants to play for the Detroit Lions. Now, I do think that Dan Campbell helps because he just looks like a character and a good player's coach. So that's probably going to help. But let's start on offense. I think the biggest thing you guys need is wide receivers. And you could definitely look for this in the draft because there's always great receivers in the draft, and this is another year of great receiving options in the draft. But you could also look to free agency with some more, I would look towards the second, third tier of names at wide receiver in free agency rather than the big names. I think the big names like the Godwins, the Odells, the Allen Robinsons are going to look to go, and Mike Williams, those type of guys, they're going to look to go to the best teams and the best, they're going to have 5 or 6 opportunities to go somewhere. So they're not going to pick the Lions. I'm just going to be honest with you. But you've got St. Brown, who I think is going to be one of your 3 starting receivers, and he looks like a promising player. Quintez Cephas is more of a role player, and that's just about everybody you got. Josh Reynolds a free agent. Khalif Raymond's a free agent. So that those guys will be gone. So you're looking for number 1 and number 2 options, in my opinion. St. Brown's like a decent inside receiver, that's that type of thing. So I would look to at least sign one of these guys, and you could probably sign multiple. You could probably sign one bigger name, second tier, and then one low key name. So looking at some of the potential values, Will Fuller is a value. If you want to try to get a number 1 receiver in free agency that's not going to cost you a ton of money, Will Fuller could be your guy. Now, a lot of teams might be scared of him because of his injury history, but when he plays, he's electric, and he'd open up your offense a ton down the field. You could look at guys like potentially Zay Jones is I feel a solid receiver. And he's kind of in that same lane as Tyrell Williams and Reynolds, who you signed last year, where they're kind of they're kind of number 3, but they're solid. Rashard Higgins is that type of name as well. Cam Sims from Washington is more of a slot receiver, but he's also kind of underrated. And then you've got maybe a Christian Kirk, who isn't going to command a ton of money, but he'll definitely be an upgrade for you. I kind of think he might get too much money, so I might stay away from him a little bit. But I do think there's a lot of options here. I do like Isaiah McKenzie as a lower tier name to target. I like DJ Chark, who's a second tier name who you could spend some money on for a number 1 maybe receiver, or at least a good number 2. Who else? Laquan Treadwell, as I brought up earlier, in the NFC East. He's a guy that really turned it on at the end of last year for Jacksonville, and I think could be a decent number 3 or decent number 2. So he's another kind of diamond in the rough. You've got guys it looks like Michael Gallup's going back to Dallas, so probably not him. Who else? Going through the list. Alan Lazard, obviously, is another low-key name. Valdez Scantling, I would be maybe a little bit tentative there because he might get a lot of money just because of his speed, and I don't think he really offers a ton else in his game. Russell Gage is a great name. That actually feels like a great fit. Russell Gage for he's been really productive in his career. Last year he had 66 catches, 770 yards. He won't cost a ton, but he's solid. Braxton Berrios is younger. Those type of guys. I think they could definitely get 1 or 2 of those guys. Jalen Guyton from the Chargers. I would be looking to that, and then maybe you try to go for a first round or second round receiver, and then that's where you get your number 1 receiver, and then try to aim for a good number 2 in free agency. Or maybe even a couple of the lower tier names to partner with St. Brown. Offensive line, I think you're good. I don't think you got to do anything there. You're all signed up across the board. You got Sewell, Decker on the edges, on the tackles, Frank Ragnow in the middle. Vitae's fit in well at guard. So you're good on the offensive line. TJ Hawkinson, you're very good at tight end. It looks like he'll be there for a while. DeAndre Swift, running back's good. Jamal Williams, you also signed. I thought maybe that was a little bit too much money, but you've got your number 1 and your number 2 running backs. Jared Goff, probably going to be the quarterback for one more season, I would think, and then they'll probably move off of him after this year, but you could do a lot worse than Jared Goff. I think he's probably like somewhere in like the 20 to 25 range for the quarterback position, and that a lot of teams would love to have Jared Goff. Like we just talked about Washington, I feel like they'd love to have Jared Goff. Defensively, you've got to do a lot of work, but I do think one area you don't have to do a ton is in the interior defensive line. You've spent a lot of capital already there with McNeil and Levi I can't say his name. Michael Brockers as well, who's a little bit older, but he could still play. Romeo Okwara on the edge. Austin Bryant and Julian Okwara as kind of role players. So you really want to look for, if you're going to spend money, I think it should be for a big-time pass rusher. Now, what I think is going to happen, at least I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't release Trey Flowers, because I like Trey Flowers. I think he's a good player. I could see him actually coming back to New England, but I view Trey Flowers as not exactly the greatest scheme fit in the world. And I do think he's making quite a bit of money. So a way that they could probably move off of him, release him, and then sign somebody that's more of like a pure pass rusher. Because I think Trey Flowers is a good all-around player. He's good against the run. He's good, as a pass rusher on the inside and the outside. But you could really go after maybe like a younger player and a guy that can really get to the quarterback. I'm trying to view the defensive end position, but Randy Gregory could be somebody like that. You could go for Hassan Reddick. Who else? Harold Landry. I think Landry would be a good one, actually. So maybe somebody a little bit younger like that, kind of like just entering their prime, like Reddick or Landry. And I'd probably move off Trey Flowers if it was me. Linebacker, Derek Barnes, if I recall correctly, wasn't bad for you at all. But you do definitely need to upgrade your linebacker position with some speed for sure. And, Anzalone, Reeves-Maben, these guys are all gone. Sean Hamilton might not be a bad re-sign. Anzalone was okay. I think you could re-sign him too. But maybe you add a linebacker. You could go in the draft. You could go in free agency. Like, I've brought up linebacker for a lot of teams. It's seemingly a need for a lot of teams. Secondary, the biggest thing I see is just you need a impact pass rusher for sure. But the secondary could use work. I think you try to get Tracy Walker back if you can, and then maybe look to free safety. I think your starting number 1 and number 2 corners aren't bad. With Okuda, and he hasn't quite hit the hype yet, but maybe he will. You spent the 3rd-round pick on Melon Fonwu, and I think you're okay at cornerback. You could maybe use a veteran in the mix there that could maybe teach these guys. Let's see. So remember, your front office is from the Saints, really. So you're looking for an Aaron Glenn, I believe. Did he coach on the Saints as well? And your coaching staff's kind of from the Saints. So you're looking at guys here. I could see them like going for guys like Darius Williams, who's younger. I could see maybe a value would be Kyle Fuller. Jason Verrett could be a value. Killa Witherspoon's younger. If they want to go corner here, Desmond King actually is probably wouldn't cost a lot, but he's a quality nickel corner if that's what you're looking for. Chandon Sullivan, same sort of thing. Those guys make sense. Mackenzie Alexander as well at nickel corner would make sense. But I think they could spend some money on free safety if they want to go with Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams makes a lot of sense. Marcus May makes a lot of sense. Even if you want to go a little bit older, veteran route, Anthony Harris could make sense as well. But I think the big target is going to be Marcus Williams. I'm not sure if they're going to get him, but they might try to. And then, like I said, try to get Tracy Walker back. Another guy that's similar to him is Jordan Whitehead, who's also a free agent. if they want to go that way. Quandre Diggs, they could also go for him. So safety and edge rusher would be the two positions I try to upgrade the most. You maybe look to the draft for linebacker. And then offensively, wide receiver, just keep hammering wide receiver. And honestly, I mean, the Lions aren't, maybe I'm saying this too much, but I don't think the Lions are that terrible. Like, they've been competitive, and I think it really comes down to the fact that they're good on the offensive line, and they've got a couple pieces that you can work with, and obviously they don't have the quarterback yet, but that's going to come with time. I think Jared Goff's fine for now. He's not going to get you a Super Bowl, but down the road, you could get that quarterback, that next Stafford, so to speak. You know, it was funny because the Lions sort of got Stafford, and then they got a team for at least a year or two, and then they never really recovered from there. But I think you spend your most money on the defense, secondary, and edge rusher, and then wide receiver maybe through the draft and add a couple lower key names in free agency. But there's a lot. I think this is a really good free agency to address a lot of the Lions' biggest needs. So that might be, you know, a really big plus. I haven't said that about every team, so that's nice. So the Lions. The Green Bay Packers. Oh boy. The Green Bay Packers. We've got Aaron Rodgers. It looks like Aaron Rodgers is coming back, although can you ever believe anything that Aaron Rodgers ever says? As Charles Barkley says, he is the pretty girl that constantly needs to be reminded that he is a pretty girl. And, you know, Aaron Rodgers, he's a drama queen, but you got to deal with the drama queen when he's that good of a football player. Now, I do think it would be a mistake for the Packers, personally, as good as he is, to pay Aaron Rodgers like $50 million like he wants. I would rather just move on from Aaron Rodgers. I think paying a quarterback $50 million is suicidal. That's just my personal opinion. There's a reason that Tom Brady's won 7 rings and he's only ever been the highest paid player once. So that's just my opinion, especially when you got to re-sign Davante Adams, who is going to be one of the top receivers in the NFL for the next 5 years at least. So Davante Adams, obviously you would love to have Aaron Rodgers back, but if you could trade him, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. Because your roster is really, really good and you don't have that many needs. And honestly, you could be a dominant team with an average quarterback, given you have a good offensive-minded coach in Matt LaFleur. And you could honestly build a team that is kind of similar to the Niners with Garoppolo, where you're kind of that like really good, but maybe you've got a middle-tier quarterback. Right now, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's MVP quality. But if it's going to come to $50 million, that just might be too much for me. That's just my opinion. But you look at the offense, I've been saying for at least 5 years that they need a number 2 receiver. They haven't had 2 good quality receivers in years. And they more so need Davante Adams to come back, obviously. But they need a number 2 receiver. And they need somebody that can make plays. And they need somebody that can do some damage. And obviously Valdez-Scantling and who's the other guy? Valdez-Scantling and Alan Lazard and St. Brown are, I believe, all free agents. Maybe you move off of Valdez-Scantling. It feels like he's going to get quite a bit of money here. And he's just not been the number 2 that you've been searching for. So I think Allen Robinson is somebody that might be a little bit cheaper, that's still a very good player that you could get as a number 2 receiver. Will Fuller is the guy that everybody brings up, but it makes a lot of sense because he's basically a better version of Marcus Scantling, and he's going to be cheaper probably. So that makes sense. Maybe you bring in veterans like T.Y. Hilton, Emmanuel Sanders, if you're going to keep Aaron Rodgers. Juju too, if he wants a slot receiver. Who else? You could look for Deshaun Jackson. I mean, if you want to go like 1 year, $3 million for Deshaun Jackson to replace Marquise Valdez-Scantling as your field stretcher, and then bring in like Juju as your slot receiver, that could work too. You could go with DJ Chark would be a good number 2 speed guy. Odell, if Odell doesn't go back to the Rams, Odell would be perfect, right? He wanted to play for Green Bay. That's one of the places that he would probably play. If you got Aaron Rodgers back, Odell would make sense. I don't think you're really in the market for Williams just because I think he's going to be too long of a contract and too big of a contract. I don't think that really makes sense personally. Offensive line is pretty solid. It would be nice to have a better right tackle, but they could definitely use a guard. Lucas Patrick is a free agent. Elton Jenkins, I don't know if they're going to play him at guard or if they're going to play him at tackle. I think guard. So the opposite guard spot, Billy Turner is currently your right tackle. Dennis Kelly's a free agent. You could use a better right tackle, but I don't think you're going to really be able to get one, just given your cap situation. Tight end, Robert Tonyan is almost a must-sign, just given his chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. It would be very nice to have him back. He's also a pretty productive blocker, so they missed him a lot at the end of the year. Having him back would be very nice. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are great. I still disagree with re-signing Aaron Jones. They should have moved off him for the cap space. Defensively, though, so offensively, guard, probably draft one, and then number 2 wide receiver, Davante Adams, re-sign him, and that's the way to go. Cheap number 2, like a Will Fuller type. And then you've got defensively, Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry. Kenny Clark's a stud. Lowry is kind of like your number 2 guy, but adding some beef in the inside, adding a little bit of depth in the inside would be nice. I don't think you're going to spend a ton of money on this position, just because I don't think you have enough money. Obviously, a guy like Akeem Hicks would be amazing, but you're not going to get him. So maybe you go with somebody like Brandon Williams or the hired gun Ndamukong Suh. 1-year contract, like $4 million, something like that. You could go with like Jonathan Hankins if you want to help your run defense on a 1-year contract. Quentin Jefferson's a solid player. Somebody like that, like not super expensive, but just like a nice third option, an upgrade over Tyler Lancaster. They could move off of Za'Darius or Preston Smith. I really like Rashawn Gary. I think he's very underrated. And I would like to keep Whitney Merciless on a 1-year deal. I thought he was good for them. It would be nice to keep Za'Darius Smith, but I think you got to probably get rid of one of these guys. There's too much money invested in this position alone, and you've got to spend that money on Devondre Campbell, who was so good for you. And you've got to have him back. Safeties and corners are good. I don't even have to say anything. Eric Stokes is going to get better. It would be nice to have Sullivan back. But Douglas could also, I feel like, play that role too. If Sullivan leaves, Douglas could play the nickel spot, and Alexander will be back. So, I mean, you're good. Maybe you add like a corner in like the late draft, like 4th round, 5th round for a younger guy, but when I look at the Packers, man, they're Super Bowl ready if they get Aaron Rodgers back and they get Davante Adams back. And then all they've got to do is find a number 2 receiver. And they've got to find depth on the D-line, re-sign Devondre Campbell, and you're good to go. Now, some of that is probably going to come with like letting go of Preston Smith. You're going to probably have to get some money. You're probably going to have to do some restructuring with Za'Darius Smith. But you can manage your way there and get your way there. So I think the Packers, man, free agency, they're never huge in free agency. They're bigger in the draft. But finding a number 2 receiver, getting your important pieces back is essential. And this is going to be more so, once again, this year, a team that does their work through the draft. All right. The Chicago Bears. I think Adams is going to be back if Aaron Rodgers is back. Just to comment on Tyler World's comment there. I don't see why Adams wouldn't want to be back if Aaron Rodgers is back. But I could be wrong, I guess. Maybe he's just paid so much money that it's just overwhelming. Okay. Da Bears are up next. And actually, Bears have quite a few free agents on both sides of the football that were starters for them a year ago. I'm just counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 starters listed on our lads that are free agents. So let's start on offense. And you have Justin Fields. At least quarterback isn't a concern for next year. We still don't know what Justin Fields is, but he showed enough upside for us to believe in him and to try to go all in on him for the next couple of years. So Justin Fields is your answer at quarterback. Nice. You've got David Montgomery at running back, and Herbert's not bad either. So you got your running back position. Wide receiver, Allen Robinson's a free agent. He'll be gonzo. Darnell Mooney might be your number one receiver moving forward, but it would be nice to add a number two. Personally, I'd probably go young through the draft, somebody to pair with Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney to have a nice young core of wide receiver, quarterback, running back, which is what you have with David Montgomery, Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney. That would be really good if you could add another guy through the draft, second, first round, high priority draft pick. Offensive line is where you could maybe spend some of your money. I think James Daniels would be amazing to have back as he's a very good player, but he might get a lot of money elsewhere, so that might be difficult. Jason Peters, if he wants to come back, would be a short-term solution at least one of the tackle spots. Played very well last year. He's just so good. He's a Hall of Famer. If he wants to play one more year, sure, why not? Tevin Jenkins, though, you spent a high pick on him. Is he going to come through? I'm not sure. But you definitely need to look at the tackle position. That's a must draft or a must sign. And I definitely think, given the Bears, they've got $26 million, which is quite a bit. So they could look to sign one of the big name tackles. They might be in the Orlando Brown, Trent Brown, Teron Armstead business. If they don't go that way, they could go for a cheaper alternative like Cornelius Lucas or Eric Fisher. Those guys would definitely be an upgrade at either tackle spot. And then you're probably counting on Jenkins playing at least one of those tackle spots. So I think that's the way you're going to go. Center could use an upgrade as well. But I think it's mostly, if you're going to spend big money, it feels like it will be on a tackle or a wide receiver. Komet's your tight end. That's fine. Defensively, Akeem Hicks might be on his way out. He's getting a little bit older. I think it's fine to let him go, although he is a very good player. And with your whole defensive scheme change, he doesn't really fit the defense as well as he did previously. But Eddie Goldman's still there, and Bilal Nichols is pretty good. I'm not sure if he's going to be back. But I definitely feel like with the new coaching staff, they're going to want to get faster on defense, and they're going to want to have speed off the edge, and definitely going for guys like, a little bit more wiry, like Randy Gregory types to pair with Khalil Mack. Robert Quinn was actually really productive, so he probably is just going to maintain that spot. Honestly, last year he was really good. So is Khalil Mack. So you got those two guys on the edge. Maybe you get younger at that spot through a draft pick. Roquan Smith is your number one linebacker. Danny Trevathan is fine as the number two, I feel like, although he gets hurt a lot. So that's not a high priority need. But if Akeem Hicks leaves, maybe you go with more of a pass rush first type of interior guy. So let's just check some of the options here. Like my favorite one to give for every team is DJ Jones. Larry Ogunjobi kind of fits that mold. Jerron Reed kind of fits that mold. Malik Collins. Who else? Quentin Jefferson's solid. Tyquan Lewis from the Colts, who could play edge or inside, where obviously your coach was before. And I definitely see secondary as a huge need. I feel like secondary has been a need ever since the whole Kyle Fuller and Bryce Callahan left. That was huge. So Jalen Johnson's good, and Eddie Jackson's good. But I definitely look at safety and corner needs an upgrade. But in this system, it's more so finding like zone players. So maybe you go with like Xavier Rhodes, who used to play in that system for Indianapolis as a short-term solution, and he's been good and kind of undervalued in that spot. If you want to go with those type of guys, it would make sense. The draft could also be a place that you target as well, the secondary spots. But my biggest areas of addressing have to be the tackle position, wide receiver. You want to get Justin Fields in a comfortable position, and you really want to find out if Justin Fields can be your franchise. So the highest priority should be wide receiver and tackle, period. Then, okay, our secondary needs are, let's make this defense a quality defense in this scheme. And you've got a few players, like you've got Jalen Johnson at corner, you've got Eddie Jackson at safety, you've got Khalil Mack off the edge, you've got Eddie Goldman in the middle, you've got Roquan Smith at linebacker. Like, with those pieces at every level, you're not going to be bad no matter who fills the other spots. So I would really just be looking to maybe add some values at every other spot to fill in on defense and really spending your big money on offense, because that's where it really needs some work. But yeah, they're getting a little bit older on defense. They're young on offense. But I think that the Bears, it's going to be interesting. But I definitely think going all in on Justin Fields on offense is the way to go. So that's the Chicago Bears. And then let's finish off the NFC North with the Minnesota Vikings. So the Minnesota Vikings, let's just check here. Minnesota is going to be interesting. I think in this kind of weaker NFC, it's going to be interesting to see what approach they take moving forward, because they have a new coach in Kevin O'Connell, new front office. Okay. So, the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins should remain your quarterback. As much as I would like him to maybe take a cheaper contract, it just doesn't feel like he's ever going to want to do that, which sucks. So I think you're going to have to wait until Kirk Cousins leaves in order to go cheaper at quarterback. But Cousins is a good enough quarterback where he's in the top 12, I would say, where he's worth keeping. Justin Jefferson's arguably the best receiver in the NFL, so you don't got to worry about that. And then you have Adam Thielen, who's still good. So you've got your number 1 and your number 2. And KJ Osborne is a nice, cheap number 3 option that I think should remain that way. So you got 3 receivers that can do some damage. But I will say, Kevin O'Connell comes from the Rams. So he's going to want to have a lot of good receivers. And they like to run 3 receiver sets. So Thielen, Jefferson, Osborne. And then you might look to add a veteran as well to pair up just to add some depth, right, to this receiving core. And I really think this offense could shift to a little bit more pass heavy with Cousins, and just because you have Justin Jefferson. So I think they could shift a little bit more pass heavy than they were with Zimmer and company and Kubiak, but they're still going to maintain that zone run scheme, which is good because they have Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison and a zone offensive line. So their offensive line's in better shape than it was before because they've got Christian Darrisaw, who's a young answer at left tackle. Brian O'Neill is a solid right tackle. They could use some work at guard, but I don't think it's pressing because all of these guys are signed. So you could use your money elsewhere, right? Their cap situation also isn't very good. So they're looking at cheap options. Probably Tyler Conklin is going to leave, although I'd like for him to stay. He kind of does remind me of Tyler Higbee. So I feel like Kevin O'Connell could use him in that way, but you're getting, is it Irv Smith back? You're getting Irv Smith back, Irv Smith Jr., who actually looked like he was going to break out last year, but he's going to be back from injury. So you're not really, it would be nice to have the nice number 1, number 2 kind of tight end options of Tyler Conklin and Irv Smith, but I don't know. CJ Ham's also there for a fullback. I'm not sure if they're going to end up keeping him because they don't really use fullbacks very much in LA. So we'll see if they move off of him maybe. The Vikings defense, I think, needs a lot of work. I've heard rumors that Eric Kendricks, they could move Eric Kendricks. I think that would be a huge, terrible decision because I think Eric Kendricks is your just heart and soul of your defense at this point at middle linebacker. And their defense is going to be like sort of Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio based. So having that nice middle linebacker that can cover, I think is huge. If you have it, you've got some big guys in the middle with Pierce and Tomlinson. That's fine. You might be paying Pierce too much money, which maybe you move off of him or try to restructure. But I think Dalvin Tomlinson is fine. You need another edge rusher opposite Danielle Hunter. Hunter is going to be great, and he's young still, which is awesome, but you need somebody on the other side. That might come through the draft because of the money situation. Anthony Barr is going to be gone. That's fine. Nick Vigil, same thing. That's fine. So Eric Kendricks is going to be essential, unless you just want to totally punt the linebacker position like the Rams have and just go totally cheap at that position and then try to build your secondary and your pass rush. Maybe you do that, but I personally wouldn't. The secondary, Peterson should be gone. I think you could keep Mackenzie Alexander if you like. Xavier Woods you could keep if you want. He was okay. Cameron Dantzler, he might be fine in this system. But you definitely need help at corner, so that could be a draft first round sort of priority. That has been something that they've been missing for years in Minnesota. But there are options like Bryce Callahan and Kyle Fuller who have actually played under your defensive coordinator. That would make a lot of sense. And maybe even somebody like Chris Harris at nickel. But I think Mackenzie Alexander would be fine. So the defense, biggest priority is corner to me, and then edge rusher, and maybe restructuring some of the guys like Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson to hopefully creating some more cap space for you. Harrison Smith, how much longer is he going to be there? But I view the Vikings as a team, given that they have the quarterback, they have a running back, they have a receiver, they've found a left tackle, they've got a couple playmakers on defense. Like, this should be about a playoff team next year. And I think Kevin O'Connell's going to make this offense better. So I think I like the direction, but their defense needs to get younger and just continue to build with what you have on offense. And really, I think the offense improvement mostly comes from the coaching more than anything. So defense, get some younger players, but offense, maybe you add a veteran or two. All right, so those are the Minnesota Vikings. And that is the NFC North. All right, take a quick second until we go to the NFC South. NFC South, we got Panthers, Falcons, Bucks, and Saints. What's up, woke queen? Cowboys was smart to release Cooper because their cap space is bad. Did they actually officially release him? I'm going to check this right now. I know that they were talking about it. Did they actually do it? I don't see that they officially did it. Did they officially do it? All right. Packers is another team that need to release somebody. Yeah, they'll probably release like Preston Smith or something like that. That's my thought. If you guys haven't already, make sure that you do Gronk, spike that like button. Really, really would help this video and for other people to find this video, and appreciate everybody who's tuning in here live. You guys are the best. Amari back to the Raiders would be interesting. I think Amari would really fit McDaniel's system and obviously has rapport with Derek Carr. So maybe that would make sense. Maybe now that it's a different Raiders situation, it would make some sense. But you wonder if, because of how it ended last time, you know, with Amari Cooper, that he was kind of like depressed and all this stuff, sort of like Calvin Ridley, which is a little odd. We'll see, though. So the next team is the Carolina Panthers. We are beginning the NFC South with the Carolina Panthers. And I am getting the vibe from the Carolina Panthers that they're willing to kind of allow this season to be a little bit of a losing one. Let's just put it that way. I get the sense that Carolina, at this point, they know that they're probably not going to get Deshaun Watson. They've tried to find solutions at quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Darnold. And I almost feel like they have given up trading for a quarterback. They have given up signing a quarterback. They want to be able to be in a spot in the draft, high in the draft, to pick a quarterback of their choice. And that is kind of the direction I see them going. It's not to say that they cannot be competitive if they want to, but I almost get the sense that they've tried that last year and they're going to have to kind of go back to the basics and sort of rebuild. So, starting with the offense, obviously, quarterback is a huge question. You could keep Sam Darnold for this season and give him one more year, given his contract. You could use him as the bridge option this season to get a higher pick and to get a quarterback for next year. You could also use PJ Walker as that as well. If they want to get somebody, they could go and they could trade for Garoppolo if they want. I think that would work. They could trade for Minshew. They could sign Mariota. They could sign Winston. I don't think Winston would really go there, but they could sign Winston. They could sign Bridgewater back. I mean, they could do that. They have familiarity with him. I feel like I would, if that's really what you're looking at, just keep Sam Darnold for one more year and just run it out with Sam Darnold. I get it. It's going to look bad, but if you know you're not going to be competitive this year, like, just go with Sam Darnold. Like, that's honestly my opinion on it. DJ Moore is the number 1 receiver. Terrace Marshall Jr. could be a nice number 2 developing. I think he's got a lot of skills. Robbie Anderson could be on his way out. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Robbie Anderson, but they did pay him, right? So I don't quite know, but he doesn't really fit in terms of a rebuild. He's a little bit older. He's getting around that 30 mark, so it wouldn't make sense for him to stick around through a rebuild sort of thing. But what they definitely need to think about rebuilding is an offensive line. Because Cameron Irving, Pat Elflein, they paid these guys a bunch of money. They were terrible decisions at the moment, and those guys stunk it up. Brady Christensen, they drafted. Not sure if he's going to be an answer in the 3rd round last year. But at least you have Taylor Moton. At least you got that guy. He's good at right tackle. Everybody else stinks. Matt Paredes is gone. John Miller is going to be gone. I guess you've got to play Pat Elflein and Cameron Irving because of their contracts, but I don't know. Maybe you could get away with that. Maybe you could move off of that. Maybe you could cut that. Maybe you could restructure that. I'm not sure. But you need to build the offensive line. And when you look at the cap space, I mean, they have enough cap to sign at least one offensive lineman. So maybe they go with Brandon Scherf at guard, or they'll go with James Daniels at guard, who's a little bit younger. They could go Ryan Jensen center if they want. They've got enough money to make those type of moves. If it was me, I'd be doing whatever I could to get off of Pat Elflein and Cameron Irving as my left tackle and left guard. And I'd be probably looking to draft a couple offensive linemen. Tight end position, I wouldn't be terribly worried about that right now. Tommy Tremble's fine. I think they like him in the building. Christian McCaffrey, I would like to trade him if I could and get, a pick back and get that cap space back maybe. I think you could probably entice a contender to take on McCaffrey and get a pick, maybe even a first, dare I say. But he is also still pretty young, I think. He's like he's like 27. So he is in his prime. The problem has been health, which is always the problem with paying running backs, right? So it depends if they want to keep him around there, but there have been rumors about trading him. And I'm sure a contender would love to have him. Defensively, Brian Burns is an absolute monster. Derek Brown is going to be a monster. Morgan Fox is solid. Yetur Gross-Matos has got upside still, I believe. But Daquan Jones is probably gone. I think your D-line is fine. So your D-line, I think he's going to be 26 this year, Durkant, or maybe 27. I'm not sure, but because I think he's in 1995, I think. Daquan Jones is going to be gone. So I think you just look to continue the youth movement on the defensive line. But the biggest, most important thing is re-signing Hassan Reddick. I don't think you can not re-sign Hassan Reddick. Because I feel like if you have Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson in the middle, Hassan Reddick, Derek Brown in the middle, like that's a great front seven. I don't care who else you have. Like, let Morgan Fox just take on a bigger role with Daquan Jones leaving, whatever. You find another run stuffer, whatever you want to do, like a veteran like Daquan Jones, that's fine. But you got Shaq Thompson in the middle, Reddick and Burns on the edge, Derek Brown on the interior defensive line, and then you've got safety Jeremy Chin, corner Horn, JC Horn, Now, you might not have the other corners. Like, I don't think Gilmore is going to come back. It doesn't make sense for him to come back. You took a chance on CJ Henderson. Maybe he develops into your number 2 corner. I was very high on him in the draft. So maybe you go into the season next year with Henderson on the perimeter and Horn on the perimeter, and then maybe you find a nickel corner cheap option or you draft one. But I think, there's a lot of upside and youth on this defense, and this defense could still be very good next year. But the most important thing here is re-signing Hassan Reddick. Also, Jermaine Carter is a good player, and if you could re-sign him, that would be nice. But you let Daquan Jones go, you let Dante Jackson leave, Justin Burris can go, Gilmore, let him go, and then bring back Reddick, bring back Carter, and continue to get young on this defense. And then offensively, if you can sign an offensive lineman, it would be nice. But you might have to look to the draft and I would just roll with Sam Darnold. Again, I would just roll with Sam Darnold, stink it up this year. Go whatever it is, 4 or 5 wins. Your defense is probably going to win you more games than you would want. And then try to get a quarterback next year through the draft or something. I think that's the way to go. So continue to build the roster around the quarterback and then get that quarterback next year through your offensive line, through your defense. Maybe you move off Robbie Anderson if the contract's workable, but I'm not sure if it is. So that's the Carolina Panthers. The Atlanta Falcons. The Ultra Atlanta Falcons. They're up next on the list. And Atlanta is a football team that's in a very awkward spot because their roster is not very strong, but they have a quarterback that basically wants to win now because he's getting up there in age. So you have to wonder how much time left Matt Ryan has as the starter for the Atlanta Falcons. Running back, Cordell Patterson, I think you'd like to have him back as long as you don't break the bank for him. Calvin Ridley, it looks like he wants out, and it looks like you're going to get a first or a second round pick for him. I wouldn't trade him unless I got a first round pick. Although I think that the whole off the field stuff and the fact that he wants to leave is probably moving his price down to a second rounder, which sucks, but he's definitely worth more than a first, honestly, given his age and given his ability. So that sucks because it would have been really nice to have Ridley and Pitts as your number 1 and your number 2 moving forward for your future quarterback, but it doesn't appear that's going to be the case. Offensive line isn't as bad as I thought it was. Jake Matthews can still play. Jalen Mayfield is a good run blocker. Jalen Mayfield, he's still young. I think, he was drafted last year. So was Hennessy 2 years ago. So you've got a lot of recent draft picks. And Mayfield, he was fine. I'd give him another year to start. I think Hennessy graded as number 7 center in the NFL from PFF. He does struggle in pass protection, but run blocking wise, he's pretty strong. And in Arthur Smith's system, I think that's fine. Chris Lindstrom's good, and Caleb McGarry could definitely use an upgrade. I think if I was looking to upgrade any of the offensive lineman spots, it'd be right tackle, because it doesn't look like McGarry is going to be there much longer. But Kyle Pitts is your tight end, who's not really a tight end, but maybe you look for an inline tight end to partner with Kyle Pitts. You could use a backup running back because I think Mike Davis is going to be cut, but that could come through the draft. So I think the offense, it would be nice to have Russell Gage back. I think you need a receiver, and that should be probably in the draft. And it's probably going to come with the pick that you get for Calvin Ridley. But you need a number 1 and probably even a number 2 as well. I don't think it would be a terrible thing if Russell Gage was your number 2. Because Kyle Pitts is like a number 1 as well, right? So defensively, defense needs a lot of work. I thought Dean Pease did a good job last year. At least you finally have a number 1 corner with A.J. Terrell. At least you finally have him. So you've got a number 1 corner. I would bring Isaiah Oliver back as your nickel corner. I thought he looked good before he got hurt. And then perimeter corner. How much money does Atlanta have? See, they're in a negative situation as well. So you're probably looking maybe to the draft for corner or just a 1-year rental option for the opposite corner spot, kind of like Fabian Moreau was a year ago. Safety, I think you're going to roll with the young duo of Hawkins and Grant. Now, they're not fantastic, but you can find what you have there, or you can find out what you have there. And I think both players actually impressed me last year. Deion Jones is going to be interesting to see if he remains on the team, given his contract, and his scheme fit isn't exactly ideal. So he could maybe be traded to a linebacker-needy team. Let's just say like a team that values linebackers that doesn't really have one. Maybe the Jets, somebody like that. And then it would be nice to keep Laquan, but I could see you going with more beef at the linebacker position. Maybe like somebody like Rashaan Evans, who used to play for the Titans with Dean Pease. Michael Walker's decent as well. You need a difference-making pass rusher, though. Like, if I was to spend money anywhere on this team, it would be for a pass rusher. Absolutely. Because I think your defense could get so much better if you had an edge rusher to pair with Grady Jarrett. Like, absolutely, that would be the place to spend your money. If I had one place to pick, it would be that position. And I feel like somebody like Harold Landry or Hassan Reddick, or those guys would be perfect and make sense to me. Or Emmanuel Ogbah too. Those three guys, I'd be trying to land one of those guys. But I think Atlanta's going to go through one more transitional year before they kind of find themselves in 2 years from now. The only problem is going to be that Matt Ryan is probably going to be gone by then. Maybe you could... See, I would trade Matt Ryan if I was Atlanta, but I don't know if they're going to be able to, given that his contract is kind of difficult to deal with. He's not quite worth his contract at this point. And he's older, and he doesn't really fit the vibe of this team and where you want to go with this team. So that's the unfortunate part. But that's the Atlanta Falcons. Edge rusher, wide receiver, and get Patterson back. There you go. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the final team in the... Or no, not the final team in the NFC South, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Super Bowl champs 2 seasons ago, and now they lose Tom Brady. 2 seasons with Tom Brady was quite an experience and a lot of winning. But I do think you're in a little bit of a transitional period from Tom Brady to the next quarterback, as well as Ali Marpet retires. Ryan Jensen's a free agent. Gronk could leave. Probably will leave. Leonard Fournette could leave. Obviously, JPP will probably be gone. Ndamukong Suh could leave. Carlton Davis is a free agent. Jordan Whitehead is a free agent. There are a lot of key players that were on this Super Bowl team and this era of Bucs football that could be on their way out. Now, I will say, the front office with Jason Light, very good GM, and I do think he'll be able to rebuild this team. The first and foremost is going to be who's the quarterback. Is it Blaine Gabbert? Is it Kyle Trask? Or is it somebody outside the building? I don't love the fit of Jimmy Garoppolo as much as it's been thrown out there. I don't think it makes any sense. It's a downfield passing attack. Jimmy is not a good downfield passer. I would cross him off the list. If you want to go with somebody with high upside from a free agent, it would be Mitchell Trubisky, or it's tough to say. Really, the one that's standing out in my head is like Wentz or Winston, and you've experienced Winston before, so it doesn't feel like a free agent is going to be high on priority. Wentz would be a trade. The draft is kind of weak. So, do you go with a game manager? Like, I heard they were interested in Teddy Bridgewater a couple years ago, but he doesn't really have the arm. I think Wentz makes sense. Offensively, though, I think you try to retain Ryan Jensen and Alex Kappa if you can, because Ali Marpet has left. It's going to do so much damage to your offensive line. Aaron Stinney will be cheap, and I think a starter for you next year. Deshaun Watson, I mean, maybe. It would be, I don't know his situation right now. It would work. I don't know if I don't know when he's going to get traded. Like, I don't know if he's going to be the quarterback this year, next year, or whatever. But they might be in the market for him for sure. Russell Wilson, potentially. I mean, those two guys would be amazing. If they could do that, I would do that for sure. I wouldn't be looking to go young at quarterback if I didn't have to, right? I don't think this team is too far away in this conference from being still very competitive, but they're definitely not as good as they were. So that's the tough thing. Like, Ali Marpet leaving definitely hurts a lot. Now, Tristan Wirfs, I think, is going to be a Hall of Famer at right tackle. Donovan Smith's a capable left tackle. Mike Evans is still playing very well, and Chris Godwin obviously is a free agent. You would love to keep that duo together of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. If Chris Godwin leaves, wide receiver becomes an absolutely huge need, and that becomes something that you draft. I don't think they're going to probably go for a free agent unless it's like a lower key name there, because they don't have anybody behind Mike Evans if Chris Godwin leaves, because unless Jalen Darden, he could maybe develop into your slot receiver, but he's very raw. Tyler Johnson, I don't think is it. Scotty Miller is not it. Like, those guys didn't play well at all last year. Rashad Perryman, you could bring back, fine, but he's like a number 4 receiver, right? Your tight end position might have a completely restructure, because OJ Howard's going to be gone. Gronk is probably going to be gone. Maybe Cam Brate's your starting tight end next year, which I think's fine. I mean, you could draft one if you want. Before Gronk, they weren't heavily utilizing tight ends. The running back position, it would be nice to have Fournette back, but I think only if you've got the quarterback answered. If you don't have quarterback answered, don't re-sign Fournette. Rojo's probably going to be gone. Gio's going to be gone. And the only other guy you have on your roster is Vaughn. So maybe you look to draft a running back in the middle rounds to pair with Vaughn, or look for a cheaper alternative to Leonard Fournette in free agency. So looking at some of the running backs, Fournette, you could go with someone like Rashad Penny, or who else? That would make sense to me. Rashad Penny does. Chase Edmonds, maybe, if you want like a pass catching guy. He's younger, though, at least. But you would probably draft somebody, because I don't think they were in love with Rojo, and I think Fournette would be the only running back that they do sign there. It does feel like Fournette wants to come back. Defensively, Sue would be a guy that I would move on from, just because he's older. Steve McLennan, same thing. William Golston, I think you should try to keep, but I don't know if he'll be back either, because he's also older. But at least you have Vita Vea, and I think Nunez Roches is pretty good too. So those two guys in the inside as your 1-2 isn't terrible. You could use depth there, though, and there's lots of depth options. You maybe just get a little bit younger at that position. Just younger on the defensive front seven in general would be something that I would try to key in on. So some alternative options to Sue and to McClendon. That Sheldon Richardson, I feel like would fit. He's at least a little bit younger. He's still in his 30s. There's not a lot of free agents that aren't that are young at this position. Usually those guys get signed, but that Fadakazi guy, he's 26 from the Jets. He's a good run defender. He would make sense for that system as well. And then you got JPP is going to be gone. I think that honestly, Shaq with Joe Tryon and Anthony Nelson, that's a good trio of edge players going into next year. I think that's totally cool. And I think at linebacker with Devin White, Levante David, KJ Britt, that's cool too. And Cam Gill also in the mix. I think those players are kind of underrated. I'd keep that intact. I just look to get younger on the interior defensive line. Let Joe Tryon play more, see what you got in him, and have Shaq Barrett on the opposite side. You got him signed. Defensively, and Jordan Whitehead I'd try to keep, but I'd rather have Carlton Davis. If I had to choose between one or the other, I'd rather have Carlton Davis. He's going to cost more. But having Carlton Davis would be big. I think Jamel Dean can play, and Sean Murphy Bunting, you might want to upgrade from him, honestly, because he kind of had a dip in his play, and I'm not sure if he's ever going to get back to where he looked like he was progressing after the playoffs last year. They've got some money, though, with all these guys potentially leaving, Marpet retiring, Brady retiring. I think they're going to most likely, I would let the tight ends leave, Fournette leave, Sue leave, Pierre-Paul leave, and try to re-sign your offensive linemen. Maybe even just Alex Kappa to a cheap contract. Then you could slide Robert Hainsey into center. He's not amazing, but he's not bad. You picked him in the 3rd round last year. Re-sign Carlton Davis. Re-sign Jordan Whitehead. And get younger on defense. And Godwin, obviously. Godwin's number 1 priority. And let Fournette go. Let kind of those, the way that I look at the Bucs is, you want to keep those, primary positions intact. The really essential positions of wide receiver, offensive line, edge rush, corner. You want to maintain those players as much as you can. It's the other positions, the icing on the cake, that you can kind of let go of. So interior defensive line, tight end, running back. Those are nice to have, but they're not essential to success. Let those guys go. Maintain, keep your money there and just get younger at those spots and try to find some guys through the draft and stuff like that. So that's how I view the Bucs. Try to keep your core younger players at the core positions. Move on from the older guys at the icing positions. And that's the way I would go. But Chris Godwin, man, you got to have Chris Godwin back. And then to finish the NFC South, the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints are also a transitional team this year and a transitional team this offseason. So we begin with the quarterback position as always. I would like to re-sign Jameis Winston. Now, as you guys see, the Saints are in the worst cap position of any team in the NFL, but they always seem to manage it quite well. They are minus $42 million, but through some little bit of magic from their front office, they'll figure out how to be plus money in no time. Now, quarterback, I'd like to get Jameis Winston back for another year, and then maybe you look to draft somebody down the road, but I think in this NFC South, a division that is not very good, is not very competitive, Tom Brady's gone, you probably have the best team if you bring back Jameis Winston, even though Sean Payton has left, which sucks. Now, Michael Thomas is a big question. Do you trade Michael Thomas? I would like to keep Michael Thomas if you could, but you might look to trade him if he doesn't want to play here anymore, and you could probably get some good assets to refill your team with. And that might be the way to go if you could. Because even though Michael Thomas is very good, this team needs some youth, and this team needs to get rid of some cap. So trading Michael Thomas might not be the worst thing in the world, even though he is a good player. Marquez Callaway is not a bad receiver, but he's certainly not really a number 2 type of receiver. So I think you look to draft receivers this season. Teron Armstead, it may suck, but you might have to let him go just because of how expensive he's going to be. But at least you've got Eric McCoy, Ruiz, and Ramczyk on that offensive line. Tight end, I don't think you're really pressing to address, although it's not very strong. Alvin Kamara at running back, we'll figure out what happens there. You could bring back Mark Ingram as your backup. Don't think he was bad. Do you end up trading like Cameron Jordan or something? He's been a Saint for a long time, about a decade. Do you look to trade him to a contender that needs a pass rush boost? I don't know, just throwing it out there. David Onyemata is good, and I think he's going to be there, but Cameron Jordan's there, Shai Tuttle's there, Marcus Davenport. Your D-line is in good shape unless you look to trade somebody there. Demario Davis is getting a little bit older, another guy that you could potentially trade if you wanted to. The depth at linebacker isn't fantastic, but you've got younger players like Warner, who you drafted last year, and Zach Bond, who you drafted 2 years ago. They're not terrible players. Bradley Roby, I've heard they might restructure or cut. So then you would need a number 2 corner. It would be nice to keep Marcus Williams if you could. There's been a lot of buzz that he might leave. Malcolm Jenkins is older. I'm not sure how much longer he's going to play. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as your nickel corner is nice. But so I really view this as bring back Jameis first. Figure out what you're doing with Michael Thomas. They restructured him according to Young Key in the chat. Thank you for that. So it does appear that he'll be back. So he'll be your number 1 receiver. Draft a number 2 receiver. And then you've got Teron Armstead at left tackle, who's probably going to have to leave just because of the money. But at least you'll be better at wide receiver. Try to manage the left tackle situation. And maybe you do trade one of your older defensive players, Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis. Try to get younger a little bit there, but Lattimore's your number 1 corner. They'll try to find a value free agent number 2, just as they do every year, like Bradley Roby was for them last year. They'll do the same thing. It would be nice to have Marcus Williams back if they could. I'm not sure. Quan Alexander's probably going to leave. So the way I see it, it's really just tough to evaluate the Saints in free agency because of their cap situation every year. So I think you've got to be able to walk the fine line of still remaining competitive and being decent because you know that you can maybe win this division, but you're not selling out to win a Super Bowl the way that you were the last couple of years. So trying to maybe move some money and move some players that are getting older to other teams, but then also maintaining some sort of semblance of decent, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? So I think that just having Michael Thomas back will be big on offense, but defensively, they don't got to do a heck of a ton. It was arguably the best defense in the NFL last year. Trying to re-sign Marcus Williams is the big priority on defense. And then offensively, number 2 receiver and finding a replacement at left tackle, adding to the receiving core, tight end, all that sort of stuff would be nice to have. But a lot of it's going to come through the draft because of their free agency number, and their cap's probably not going to be fully solved during free agency. So just as it happened last year, like with Bradley Roby and Quan Alexander, and I believe they signed the nickel corner, Brian Poole, all this stuff kind of happened in July and August, which is late, but eventually it happened. And that's probably, for Saints fans, it's going to have to happen that way again, honestly. But they don't have a ton of free agents. They don't. So we'll see what happens. But that's the Saints, and that's the NFC South. And the final division, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Saints we just did. We've got the Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals, 49ers in the NFC West. It's our final division. And I got no water left. So I'm doing this waterless, guys. If you haven't already, make sure that you do. Gronk spike that like button. Thank you guys for the support, and thank you guys for tuning in live. All right. Let's go with the Los Angeles Rams. Beginning the NFC West, we begin with the Super Bowl champions, the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, they're going to have to try to maintain and go all in for another Super Bowl to go back-to-back. They're very much in a similar space to the Bucs. Similar space to the Bucs last year, which is a little bit scary because we saw what happened to the Bucs. They kind of just got unlucky. They got really injured, and a few players, older players, regressed. But we start with the offensive side of the ball. One of the guys that they would love to have back is Odell Beckham Jr. And I think Odell would love to go back. But if you actually look at it reasonably, Odell would be one of the more reasonable players to actually let go of. And why they say that is because Cooper Kupp is there, and Robert Woods is going to be back. So unless you move Robert Woods and then sign Odell, one of those two players, you can't have all of those 3 receivers. It's going to be very difficult to do that unless one of them takes a significant pay cut. Because I feel like Cooper Kupp, Odell and Van Jefferson, or Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Robert Woods, that's a great trio either way. So you probably are not going to have Cooper Kupp, Odell, Robert Woods, and Van Jefferson. If you did, I mean, that would be spectacular, but you're going to have to take chunks out of other positions, right? Because you look at the Rams cap space right now, it's minus $21.6 million. That's a lot. So honestly, one of the more reasonable moves to make would just be not re-signing Odell as much as you would like to have him back. Now, left tackle Andrew Whitworth, I assume is going to retire if he hasn't already. He's currently still on the depth chart. I haven't officially seen anything, I don't think. If anyone knows that officially, let me know. But the offensive line is a big-time concern for this team entering next year. Because given their cap situation and given all the free agents they have, it's going to be tough to really have a good offensive line next year the way it was this year, which was one of the better ones in the league. David Edwards is there for left guard, and Rob Havenstein is there for right tackle. Both those guys are good. Now, Brian Allen and Austin Corbett are both free agents. And then Andrew Whitworth, you've got the age question, right? I would look, if Brian Allen leaves for a little bit of sum of money, I would look to bring back Austin Blythe as your center. That would be because you would probably get him at a 1-year contract, reasonable money, and replace him. And he played well for you guys a couple years ago. Austin Corbett would be nice to have as well, but he's young, he's a guard, a lot of teams need offensive linemen, he's probably going to get signed somewhere with more money, and that's fine. You might have to draft some offensive linemen, but again, they don't have a lot of draft picks. So you're going to have to budget ball your way to some offensive linemen. Now, typically, McVay makes these offensive linemen better in his system. I mentioned Austin Blythe as somebody that would be an option for you at center or guard. I'm going to try to load up the other guards, but yeah, you're going to have to, that's tough, man. And left tackle with Andrew Whitworth is going to be tough. Does Bobby Evans become a starter, or do you sign Joseph Noteboom to become your left tackle? That's going to be tough too. Joseph Noteboom played really well versus the Bucs, by the way. So maybe you go there for cheap at left tackle if Whitworth does not come back. Other alternatives that could be cheap at guard. Duvernay Tardif could probably be pretty cheap. Will Hernandez from the Giants. Kyle Long, who would probably play for a contender. That would make sense. Aaron Stinney of the Bucs. Like a guy like Quentin Spain, who played in a similar system in Cincinnati, wasn't very good, but at least he's starting caliber. So those guys, you could ball in on a budget sort of thing. Tight end, Higbee and Blanton, I think are a nice number 1, number 2. And Bryson Hopkins is a nice little guy as well. Sony Michel's probably going to leave. You just can't afford him. So I think it's going to be Henderson and Akers next year with Jake Funk as probably your number 3 running back. And then defensively, A'Shawn Robinson was a very nice find. He's still signed. Greg Gaines is there. He's still signed. Aaron Donald is still signed. So you're good on the interior. Sebastian Joseph Day is going to leave somewhere else. Now, Von Miller, do you bring him back or do you not bring him back? What I would do is I would let him walk unless he wants to come on a 1-year deal for a little bit. Not a lot of money, just a little bit. If he wants to come back for a 1-year contract or whatever, or maybe you put it on 2 years and you space it out, that sort of way, maybe you do that. But this is the way that I would approach it if I'm the Rams. I would just try to find the next Von Miller at the trade deadline or, throughout the season next year. When you find that you have enough room and you're going for a championship run, try to find the next veteran defensive end, edge rusher that wants to come and go for a championship. That's the ultimate thing with the Rams, is they have that championship pull now that a team like the Bucs did last year. But they're not in as good of a cap spot as the Bucs were last year to retain everybody. You could also, a guy that you could bring back is Dante Fowler. That would make sense to me. for like a 1-year cheap contract. There's probably other guys that you could do this with, like Tack McKinley, Ryan Kerrigan. Who else? He's a veteran that would probably try to chase a ring. Who's a guy that could be budget type player? Those are the guys that I really see off the top. And I also think like you've got a couple guys like Terrell Lewis and Justin Hollins could develop into some good players. Leonard Floyd is already a good player, and he would be like your number 1 edge rusher if Vaughn leaves. I just think Vaughn's ultimately going to be too expensive. Kyler Fackrell's another kind of like under, kind of cheap option. Malik Reed is a restricted free agent, so he's not unrestricted. Now, those type of guys that I'm reading off. And inside linebacker could use an upgrade, but it didn't end up killing you this year. I feel like if you could get a veteran, again, cheap, that might not be a bad look. You could also look for the draft to add a little bit of athleticism to that position. Cornerback, Darius Williams looks like he's probably going to go. You would like to have him back with Jalen Ramsey. It does feel like he's going to get a lot of money on the open market, though. So you're going to have to look for some guys that, again, same theme here, probably veteran short-term solutions, and then you got to find a way through it. So Kyle Fuller fits this system well. Maybe you look at somebody like Joe Hayden, who's never won a Super Bowl but has been chasing one. You could look at Xavier Rhodes, Jimmy Smith. These are older guys. Steven Nelson, solid in really every system. Casey Hayward. Like, these guys are going to be probably pretty cheap, short-term solutions, but probably pretty solid, though. Jason McCourty. Who else? Like, if you lose Darius Williams, that's kind of the approach that I would go with. Safety, Nick Scott, Taylor Rapp, Terrell Burgess. I think that's fine. It's not fantastic, but it got the job done this year. Jalen Ramsey and David Long are fine. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey's a superstar. So continuing to, I think through the draft, you probably add a corner or two, and then you look to add a couple you look to add a couple veteran free agents where you can. Edge, corner, maybe linebacker, maybe safety, but you're good on the interior defensive line, and you really need to work on that offensive line. And you got to figure out the wide receiver situation. So, yeah, the Rams are tough because you want to be able to fix your cap, but you also want to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. And I think the Rams, they've just been able to do this year in and year out, where they have these superstars that are the foundation of their roster. Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford now, Leonard Floyd on the edge, Jalen Ramsey at corner. These are your foundational pieces, and then you build the rest. You find the budget free agents, the 1-year contract guys like the Ashawn Robinsons of the world, and then you also draft a couple contributors each and every year. So that's the way I see the Rams. Maybe, I'm not sure what Johnny Hecker's contract's like, but you could also maybe, move on from Johnny Hekker. As good as he is, he might not be worth paying a punter as much as he's probably making at this point. Although I don't have no real knowledge of what he actually is making, but I assume it's quite a bit. So that's the Rams. The Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks are next in the NFC West, and the Seattle Seahawks are a football team that they need to figure out what Russell Wilson is doing first. First and foremost, what is Russell Wilson doing? And then you go from there, right? So Russell Wilson, he's back. Okay, we've got a chance. Dwayne Brown, come on back. If Russell Wilson's gone, if you're trading him, and it appears that he'll be back, but let's say he's gone, I wouldn't bring back Dwayne Brown. What's the point? He's an older tackle. Just let him go. Now, if Russell Wilson stays, Dwayne Brown coming back makes sense. I think the offensive line actually hasn't been bad. I think you could use a right tackle and you could use a center maybe upgrade, but the guard position is quite good for you. And if Dwayne Brown's back, he's a good left tackle for as long as he wants to play. Finding a number 3 receiver is still a priority. I feel like looking at the draft could be that, where you go with that. But Dwayne Eskridge, you drafted in the 2nd round last year. So do you spend another high priority pick on wide receiver? Probably not, right? Because you spent a lot of them lately. But DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are both your number 1 and number 2, one of the best duos in the league. And Dwayne Eskridge, you hope to be that number 3. Maybe you bring in a low-key veteran in the same vein of a Freddie Swain that you already have that can maybe compete with Eskridge as your number 3 receiver. Maybe I don't know if he's still playing, but like Danny Amendola, just a random name, but somebody like that. Then tight end, I don't know if they want to bring back Gerald Everett. I don't really see the need to press to get him back. I think he's fine. He'd be nice to have back. I don't think he's a difference maker. Same with Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny, it would be nice to have him back. I don't think you need to have him back, right? Tight end and running back, especially in this team and this offense, they're not massive needs. I'd rather build my offensive line and find, and add to your defense, right? And they don't got a lot of salary cap here. So you're looking at the defensive line. I do wish they had a difference maker up front on the defensive line. It's going to be hard for them to find that. They've got a lot of solid players. Kerry Hyder, Poona Ford, Carlos Dunlap, Benson Mayowa, LJ Collier. These guys, they're okay. A lot of them are, some of them are above average. Kerry Hyder, Carlos Dunlap, Poona Ford, above average, but they're not fantastic. So a difference-making D-end, like your new Cliff Averill, would be nice to have. I just don't know if you have the money to do that right now. So that, I mean, you could, I guess. You do have $35 million. I thought it was less for some reason, but you could. It's going to be interesting to see what they try to do. But I think I'm still upset that they're still keeping Pete Carroll around. I just want side point. I still think that they should have moved on from Pete Carroll if they're going to bring back Russell Wilson. So the secondary, re-sign Quandre Diggs, re-sign DJ Reed, find new perimeter corners. Maybe you go with J.C. Jackson. And this is going to be the interesting thing. Do they spend a lot of money on corner or pass rusher? Personally, I'd rather spend it on a pass rusher. But given the age of like J.C. Jackson and Carlton Davis, if they could get one of those guys, I would like to do that over a lot of the pass rushers because a lot of the pass rushers are a little bit older. But Reed and Diggs are probably your two biggest free agent signings that you need as your nickel and your safety, and then Dwayne Brown as your left tackle. Re-sign Ethan Pochich as your center. I would look to spend most of my money on the defense because I don't think they need a ton on offense. They really don't need a ton on offense because you've got Russell Wilson. You've got a killer wide receiver duo. Maybe you draft a running back or you bring back Rashad Penny on a cheap contract. That's your number one running back, okay? You re-sign Ethan Pochich and Dwayne Brown at offensive line, and your offensive line's okay, right? It's not terrible. You find a veteran wide receiver 3 that can compete with Eskridge. Your defense, you need a killer off the edge to pair with Kerry Hyder and Poona Ford. And that's where I'd spend my money because the Seahawks have always been better with pass rushers, right? So try to get an Ogba or a Reddick or even a Chandler Jones. You could get a Chandler Jones. This is a team that I would look to be in the market for some of the veteran pass rushers as well. The Von Millers. I would be in the market for that because you've got Russell Wilson, who's not exactly young, right? So I would look to bring in those guys. I wouldn't just, in the last couple of years, they've been sort of adding like the veteran role players. I'd be looking to add one stud. And there's a few. Like there's about 5 on the market this offseason that would work in that regard. as I brought up, Ogba, Reddick, Chandler Jones, Von Miller. These guys are all really good players. Randy Gregory is a great fit. Randy Gregory would make maybe the most sense. And then, hey, maybe you're in the J.C. Jackson market, but don't overspend. And try to upgrade that corner position, probably a little bit through the draft. Resign Reed, resign Diggs. But maybe you try to entice a Stephon Gilmore, veteran corner, to be your number one. Maybe you try to bring in a Kyle Fuller or veterans like this, right? I think that the Seahawks could easily reform a team if they just got, a pass rusher and a number one corner. And I know that's a lot. They would be a playoff team with Russell Wilson. And I don't think that is crazy to say at all. So, Seattle, you have a very interesting free agency ahead of you. Your front office has missed quite a bit lately, but if they can hit this offseason, they might have something. The Arizona Cardinals are next. Thank you, Jake, by the way, for the super chat. He says, great live so far. Keep killing it. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate the super chat, man. Thank you so much. All right, the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals have some drama on their hands with Kyler Murray. So how do we make Kyler Murray happy? That's going to be interesting. Christian Kirk is a free agent. Does re-signing Christian Kirk help? I don't know. I don't think so. I think you move on from Christian Kirk. I wouldn't overspend for him. AJ Green, maybe you bring him back on a cheap one-year contract. Sure, why not? He was a nice number 4, number 3 option. Sure. You could trade Andy Isabella for a late pick. Rondell Moore looks to be a number 3, maybe a number 2 in this league. Given their contract and given their salary cap space, they don't have a lot of money. So Kirk is gone. Green might be gone, but D-Hop and Rondell Moore are going to be there. Offensive line, you got your left tackle, DJ Humphries. Left guard, Justin Pugh's fine. Maybe you move on from him, given his contract. Rodney Hudson at center. Right tackle and right guard are a little bit questionable. Maybe you look to draft the right side of your offensive line to protect Kyler Murray. Zach Ertz you'd like to have back, although he might be a bit pricey given your cap situation. But he was a really nice fit in this offense that I thought played very well for you. So if you could bring him or AJ Green back, I'd prefer Zach Ertz. Running back situation, it's going to be tough to retain both Chase Edmonds and James Conner. I thought James Conner was really good for you last year, but if I was to choose one for the future, I would choose Chase Edmonds and I would draft a running back to play the James Conner role. That's just my opinion. But James Conner was really good. I think he's going to be more expensive, though, than Edmonds. And then you look at defense. The interior defensive line could use an upgrade beside J.J. Watt and some depth. Use a little bit of size, use a little bit of, run defense. Maybe you bring back Calais Campbell. I brought that up as a prediction. You could bring in, Brandon Williams, a big sucker in the middle. Chandler Jones is a free agent. He's probably going to go because he's just going to be too expensive. Your linebacker position, maybe you move on from Jordan Hicks, you trade him or you cut him. Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons are your future at the linebacker position. Use them. Marcus Golden is an underrated player. Devin Kennard is a decent role player, but you need to find another edge player, and that's probably going to come through the draft. Corners are definitely a need. If you could somehow land a man coverage corner like Carlton Davis or J.C. Jackson, go ahead and do it. I just don't know if you'll have enough money to do so. But some under-the-radar names could be maybe guys like, let's go with Mike Hughes, under the radar. Who else? Hey, a veteran like Jason McCourty might help you out. Keep scrolling. Anthony Everett from the Ravens. These guys make sense to me. I feel like I had another name that I wanted them to sign, but I couldn't remember. Malcolm Butler is apparently coming back to the NFL. I don't think it's going to be with Arizona, though. Byron Murphy is a good nickel corner. Budda Baker's a good safety. You could use an upgrade opposite Budda Baker, but the Thompsons aren't terrible. So, looking at this team, I think the priority is right tackle and right side of the offensive line. Interior presence on the D, edge presence to replace Chandler Jones, and cornerback. And those are the kind of the positions that I see the most. It would be nice to have another receiver. It's just going to be hard because that's going to have to come through the draft if you do find another one, just because the money situation. So the Cardinals, it's going to be tough for them to be better than they were last year. And with this whole Kyler Murray stuff, it's going to be, overcoming that's also going to be difficult, but it's not impossible. They just got to make the right moves. Maybe don't go as hard and heavy for the big names as he did last year and try to find the diamonds in the rough and try to add more free agents rather than free agents for a lot of money. And the final team for our NFL free agency plans is the San Francisco 49ers. The team that I believe is in a very good spot entering the future. The team of the future in the NFC, as I've stated. Kyle Shanahan's team, John Lynch. Now, something that's going to be very helpful for the 49ers is, if they don't get Tom Brady, that is, going young at the quarterback position is going to allow them to go cheap at the quarterback position, which might be hugely helpful. As helpful as it is to just have a good quarterback, it might be to have a quarterback that is cheap. So having Trey Lance and trading Jimmy Garoppolo, you're getting rid of $25 million this year. And that's going to open up space. What's that space going to allow you to do? It's going to allow you to re-sign Kwan Williams and Lincoln Tomlinson, your two biggest free agents. It's going to allow you to re-sign DJ Jones and maybe Jaquiski Tart if you like, but probably Arden Key as well. They're going to get rid of D Ford to open up some cap space. That's cool. I would like for them to keep DJ Jones. I'd like for them to keep Arden Key. I'd like for them to keep Kwan Williams for sure on the defensive side of the football. I would like for them to sign a cornerback. Hopefully, you know what they should do? They should bring back, I know that a lot of 49ers fans might be frustrated with this, but they should try to bring back Jason Verrett on a 1-year low-money contract and then sign Stephon Gilmore or Kyle Fuller or Xavier Rhodes even, or Casey Hayward, one of these players. Okay, veteran, number one corner, and put them with Kwan Williams and who's the other one? Emmanuel Mosley, and then you also got Ambry Thomas. So that would be a good corner group. You could draft a safety if you like, if you don't want to re-sign Jaquiski Tart. He's a good player. He's not like an irreplaceable player, though. Your linebacker position is good. Samson Ebukam's nice. Eric Armstead's still there. Obviously, Nick Bosa. Charles Omenihu's solid. You've got a lot of still solid depth pieces, but I think the solid depth pieces you need to retain are probably Arden Key is more likely than DJ Jones, but DJ Jones would be nice to have back. And then offensively, I think your receiver position is good. Maybe you draft one with like a later pick, because I think Ayuk, Debo, and Jennings as your 1, 2, 3, that's solid. You could do better, but there's no need to spend money on it. Tomlinson, bring him back. Then you solidify your offensive line. You've got McGlinchey coming back at right tackle. Tom Compton will probably be gone somewhere else. It would be nice to add depth to the offensive line, but you did spend a second-round pick on Aaron Banks, I believe. So that's some depth right there. And running back, I think they'll draft. I think they'll draft a running back along with Elijah Mitchell. I don't think Alex Mack is going to retire quite yet. Some alternatives. So if they leave, let's see. I think a lot of the Niners is just going to be about retaining a lot of their players and then adding probably the big free agent ticket will probably be a corner. But you look at the center position. If Mac leaves, I don't think they'll go with Ryan Jensen. I think it would be more so in the lane of like Matt Paredes or Brian Allen possibly. I think Jensen will just be too expensive. I think Mac's going to stay one more year, or they'll draft one. And then guard, if Tomlinson leaves, again, draft's a possibility, but they could go with, let's see, anybody like Corbett could be somebody they go with. Norwell, maybe Alex Kappa, but who else is there? James Daniels would be awesome, but he's going to be expensive. Connor Williams, maybe. Maybe they just re-signed Tom Compton. I don't know. He could play guard for them, to be honest. So, yeah, I think the Niners are in a good spot. I think they're just going to try to retain their primary important priority free agents and add to the secondary. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not a lot that has to be done here. I think the number one thing I'd like to see is for them to get a number one corner. And I think that would just add so much flexibility to their defensive scheme and what DeMeco Ryans can do. And I'd like for them to keep Arden Key and DJ Jones and Kwan Williams and Lincoln Tomlinson. And then running back, I think could use an upgrade, but I wouldn't spend money on it in free agency. I'd probably just draft. Unless they trade for Saquon or something like that, which don't count that out, which would be amazing. If they could trade for Saquon, I would do it. But running back, you could get in the draft, like in the fourth round, and pair a guy with Elijah Mitchell. I don't think they're going to bring Raheem Mostert back just because he's older and he'll probably get more money elsewhere, to be honest with you. But if they get him on a 1 year like short contract, they could do that as well. So that's the 49ers, guys. And those are your free agency plans for every single team in the NFL and every single NFC team in this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, don't forget to Gronk spike that like button and subscribe for more BLV just like this. Appreciate everybody that tuned in live over the last couple of days. We'll have much more free agency content coming to you very, very soon. It's Mitch. Peace.